Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Planning Committee on Thursday, the 22nd of January, our first one of the new year. Thank you. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on the proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not please spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, our assembly point is the High Street outside the Guildhall. Members and speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking, and if necessary, they do pick up and move, but it's really important that you are heard and picked up by the receiver for YouTube. Thank you. Okay, so Margaret, do we have any substitutes or apologies, please?
There are no substitutes or apologies today, Chair. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. We have a full house. Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? Actually, Steph, you've got something to say, I think. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The item before members today relating to the commandery is a City Council application, and it relates to the moving of the Worcestershire Soldier exhibition from the City Museum to the commandery. I believe that some issues around funding of this will have been to Policy and Resources a number of years ago, but I'm content that that's a discussion of the scheme in the wider sense, and that the detail of the application before you won't have been discussed. So I'm happy for you all to participate and vote, unless anyone has any other interests to raise. No, I'm not seeing anyone. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we go to the minutes of the previous planning committee. This was on the 11th of December. And, you know, thank you, Margaret, for doing this, particularly because you've been so poorly. Thank you. Shall we go through page by page, please? Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. That's a lot of minutes. Thank you very much, Margaret. I'll sign those as a fair reflection of what happened at the meeting. Thank you. Okay, we've also got, and these are to note that we've received them. It's the minutes of the Conservation Advisory Panel. We've got two, actually. So they had a meeting on the 5th of November and the 7th of January. So I'll just take it that you've all read those. As usual, really interesting, lots of interesting comments on projects that are, and a good update for everyone about the new design review panel, which will obviously have an impact on us, so that's wonderful. Okay. We did have a site visit today. It was for agenda item 10, the land to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road. Thank you to all members who came along. I think there were 7 of us, so it was a very good turnout. And we also had the applicant come and, or the agent, open up the site so we could go behind, which was really useful, so thank you. Do we have any public participation or representation, please, Margaret?
There's no public participation, but we do have public representation on agenda item 10, land to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road, and we have Lorraine and Richard Gannon to speak. Thank you. And we also have Mark Sherwood, our Property Services Manager, speaking on the commandery item. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And because of that, we've got speakers for item 9 and 10. We're going to move 8 to the end so that the speakers don't have to hang around the whole time. And in fact, so we'll start with agenda item 9, the commandery, and we've got Mark Sherwood has come up, and you'll speak after. We'll have the officers first. Thank you. You'll have 5 minutes, I think. So we've got Laura. Oh, you? Where is Laura? You're not doing it? Okay, fine. Oh, you're doing it. Oh, sorry, you're doing the next one. Oh, I was looking at 8. You're doing 8. You're coming in later. Okay, so it's going. Yeah, Paul. Paul, Rebecca, Laura. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So this application relates to the canal wing at the Commandery, which is a Grade 1 listed building of national importance. And just so that we've got an idea of the Commandery, I'm sure everybody is aware of what it looks like and where it is. There's a picture historically which was included within the Heritage Statement as part of the application. And that just highlights the Commandery wing. So, as members will be aware, that the Commandery is one of Worcester's most historically significant buildings, with the origins in the 13th century and the core of the 15th century structure. Over the centuries, it has served as a hospital, a private residence, royalist headquarters, printing works, and currently functions as a museum and heritage centre. The application is brought before you today because it is a council-owned listed building and proposes works that, while largely internal, are essentially enable a major once-in-a-generation heritage project. The canal wing is located at the western end of the building and faces the Worcester and Birmingham Canal. The Commandery as a whole forms an irregular H-shaped plan with wings extending towards courtyards and gardens linking Sidbury and Wards Lane. The canal wing itself contains a mixture of historic fabric, including timber-framed walls, brick infill, and the early 15th century roof structures, all of which have been carefully maintained to support the continued public access. The application seeks for listed building consent for internal security works to windows and a door on the ground and first floor of the canal wing. And just some pictures of the floor plans showing the identification of the windows. And just to help, so that blown up slightly, you can see where it's red, they are highlighting areas where they will be boarded, and the blue areas show internal window bars. That's at ground floor, and then at first floor, similar picture there. So the proposed works involve the installation of internal metalwork designed as artwork to restrict access through selected windows, along with internal plywood infill screens for certain windows and the door, where exhibition displays will occupy the wall of those areas. All of these interventions will be fixed internally, leaving the external appearance of the windows and doors unchanged. The works have been designed to be fully reversible, ensuring the historic fabric is protected for future generations. These measures have been developed in close consultation with the insurers and the Art Council to ensure that they meet the required standards for the protection of the exhibits while remaining sensitive to the heritage of the building. The security works are necessary to enable the relocation of the regimental gallery to the canal wing as a permanent exhibition. This once-in-a-generation project will safeguard the public access to Worcester's military heritage, which otherwise might be at risk of being lost. The gallery will create new permanent displays telling the story of the Worcestershire soldier from 1694 to the present day. It will reposition the county's regimental collections so that their stories and objects are accessible and relevant to modern audiences, many of whom have no direct connection to military service. The works are also required to meet insurance and accreditation requirements, ensuring safe public access and a suitable environment conditions for the exhibition. By so doing, the project will secure the future of the county's regimental museums, raise the profile of the nationally significant Grade 1 listed Commandery, and contribute to Worcester's ambition to strengthen its status as a heritage destination. The gallery is currently scheduled to open in February 28. The precise design of the internal artwork will be agreed through a planning condition as recommended. The intention is to draw on the building's architectural history, for example, incorporating decorative motifs, herald symbols or fleur-de-lis, rather than anything overtly military. The works represent the minimum necessary intervention and follow best practice conservation principles. The use of materials in the installation methods are sensitive to the significance of the canal wing. Turning to the specific proposals, we start with the elevation fronting onto the canal. That's a historic picture that was taken from the heritage statement, just showing the canal wing from a historic point of view. Part of this proposal, 4 windows on this elevation are affected. At first floor level, 3 windows are proposed to be secured with internal metalwork, highlighted green on the slide, and 2 will be treated with internal boarding, highlighted in blue. At ground floor level, 2 windows that are already shuttered will be treated with internal boarding. Here are the photographs of a little bit closer, again showing the ones to be barred and the ones to be boarded. This is an internal photograph showing the first floor windows, and again showing the ones to be boarded and the ones to be barred with and treated with metalwork. And the final elevation is one beyond the 3-storey wing, shows 1 further window which will be treated with internal bars. Turning to the elevations facing the the courtyard, 8 windows and 1 door are involved within the proposal. And again, just a historic photo of that internal courtyard. And there we have the windows to be implicated as part of this proposal. We have again the blue to be boarded and the green to be treated with internal ironwork. That's a closer picture of the Great Hall, and you can see the windows to the left-hand side. And again, with our backs to the Great Hall, looking back towards that range, showing the windows to be affected. And finally, I think we've seen that one already. Members will have seen within the report that the Council's Conservation Officer has been consulted and confirms that the proposals have an acceptable impact on the significance of the building. And the officer notes that the works are reversible and carefully designed. Historic England have also been consulted and found the works acceptable. No public exceptions have been received, and the proposals are consistent with the South Worcestershire Development Plan and the NPPF. The works ensure that the canal wing can accommodate the public exhibition while safeguarding the building's historic character. In considering this application, members will be aware that Section 16 of the Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act of 1990 requires that special regard is to be had in the desirability of preserving the building and any features of special architectural or historic interest. Officers considered that the proposals represent the minimum intervention necessary to enable the canal wing to accommodate the regimental gallery. The works are designed to be reversible, use appropriate materials, and will not cause harm to the building's historic significance. They will contribute positively to allowing public access and ensuring the sustainable use of this Grade 1 heritage asset. In summary, the proposed security works are essential to the delivery of this significant heritage project. They enable the permanent exhibition in a building of national importance. The interventions are carefully designed to preserve the building's character. They are reversible and have full support of the Council's Conservation Officer and Historic England. Officers therefore recommend that listed building consent be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the report, with particular emphasis on agreeing the final design of the internal artwork through planning condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so we've got public speaker. We've got Mark Sherwood. You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so just to add to Paul's sort of summary, whilst the building is a museum at the moment, the insurers felt that the security does need upgrading. Obviously, the external envelope is always the weak point, and that's the bit that we're looking at on this application. So we have got a combination of boards and windows, which are dictated by the exhibition, albeit the windows with the bars on are sort of more prevalent. When I say bars, what we're trying to do with working with the insurers, obviously they've got the main security in mind and the stereotypical sort of prison-type bars. From our point of view, we're looking to get away from that and do something more sort of in keeping with the building, so it's not so sort of prison sort of style like. So we are looking to, we've been working with an art company, metalwork art company, to try and do something a bit different. We've obviously got guidelines with sort of centres and sort of gauges of steel we've got to work through and fixings, but we're trying to do something a bit different, just to keep in keeping with the historic nature of the building. The boarding, as mentioned again, that is something that we've been working with the insurers, but we're looking to put that in the inside so it has minimal impact, and we will be sort of refurbishing the windows before we obviously put that in, again, just so when you look at the appearance from the outside, it has minimal impact as well.
Thank you very much. Have I got any questions for our speaker, please?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, by blocking up windows, you're taking away light. How will that be compensated for within the building, or won't it? And what implication does it have on the electricity bill?
The number of windows are being boarded up are quite minimal. In the first part of the area where the former shop was, there's 3 windows in there, which we are boarding all 3 up, but 2 of them are already have shutters on already. The others in the next section, the high-level windows, there's 4 sort of apertures within that window section, of which we're boarding up 2. So there's still 2 they're going to be operating with light and ventilation. So it will have minimal impact, the actual boarding up.
Councillor Rudge? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check? The bars obviously sound very secure, but the boarding up sounds less secure. Is that fair, or have I misunderstood how solid the boarding is?
The boarding is a grade where it's more sort of your structural timber, and it's going to be within the frame, so it is going to be difficult to penetrate through. Yeah, so it's something that the Arts Council have done elsewhere, so we're replicating that.
Any other questions? Councillor Agar.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, will you be keeping the shutters on those boarded windows? I'm thinking of the appearance from the outside.
The shutters are more on the inside at the moment. Externally, it's actually graphics on the windows, so it's advertising the commandery itself. So we were looking to just retain that. We'd obviously take the shutters off, but externally it would just look the same.
Councillor Udall.
Just a very brief question, and I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but I can't find it. If the committee chose not to support this, would that endanger the entire project, and the proposals for the Worcester Soldier could not proceed because insecurity would be insufficient? Is that the risk which we're potentially taking?
Potentially, yes. We would need to do something to the windows, and there's also an external door as well. So without that, we wouldn't be able to satisfy the insurers.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you for coming. Mark's very helpful. If you want to go back to your seat, that's fine. Have we got any questions for Paul, please, or anything at all? If you want to start. Would anybody like to start a debate then? Or?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I looked at the proposal and saw the pictures which we had in front of us, and obviously the information which we've just been given has helped. I see this as a major advancement for Worcester to have the exhibition being placed in the commandery. As a general visitor to the site, I don't think I would notice anything different from what I'm there, which is there already. It would not dilute my pleasure of the building. I think the consequences of that means this is a no-brainer. It needs to gain our consent and support. I see no reason to oppose it. I would like, if it helps, I'll move with the recommendation of support.
Great, thank you, Councillor Udall. I'll just put that on hold for the moment, as we've had no other contributions. I just wanted to say, you know, you all did have a late paper on this. just gone over it, and I think everything's been mentioned actually in the officer's presentation. So, but just to highlight that, I've got Councillor Kimberley now, please.
And again at the reinforcements of the windows. And let me just say how glad I am that we're recognising the power of artwork to make our communities stronger and safer. Perhaps not always quite this literally, but I think it's a very tasteful balance of conserving the community. I remember a few days ago I was asked, talking to some students, like what are some of our greatest strengths in Worcester, and one of them is our heritage. It's absolutely key that we must protect it, conserve it, and where possible, enhance it. This proposal seems like an elegant and tasteful way to do that, combining the practical value of with conservation and enhancement. So I look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kimberley, and I think that's absolutely right. The opportunity for art in such a historic building is well received, I think. Councillor Agar, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimberley. I think that point's well made, and Chair as well. I wouldn't normally want to condone putting bars on any building in Worcester, but this is not quite normal. We are talking about an exhibition of soldiering, and there are bound to be armaments in there of some sort, whether they're old ones or more modern ones. I should think they'll be mostly older ones. But I think that given that the insurers feel a need to secure it in this way, I think really we should approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Agar. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, another good report that ticks all the right boxes in my head about fixing into mortar joints and avoiding historic fabric where possible, having basically a reversible proposal, and the business case is very clear. I think this is being implemented sensitively and appropriately, and it clearly meets a need that, as we've heard, needs to be met. So when the time comes, I'll be happy to second this.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Yeah, it occurred to me actually that a building of this age will have had lots of modernisation over the years, and the important thing is how sympathetically it is done, because obviously we do need a building that actually functions for its purpose. So do I have any other anybody else want to say anything at all? Okay, so I think generally we've had a really good informative presentation. Thank you for the additional slides as well. I think explaining where the windows were really helps, and realising it's not the whole building being barred. It's wonderful. In that case, are we ready to move to a vote? Yes. Okay. So we've got the proposal is Councillor Udall. Seconder is Councillor Cross. Can I see all votes in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is agenda 10. Is that right? Yes. And it is Rebecca. And this is the one that we had the site visit for. Would you like to come forwards? We've got our public speakers. This is the land to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road. And this is a permission in principle. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So agenda item 10 concerns the application for permission in principle at land to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road. Application reference 25/00988/PIP. Permission in principle is sought for the construction of up to 5 dwellings following the proposed demolition of the existing garage blocks. The application is reported to Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Hannah Cooper. The permission in principle consent route is an alternative way of obtaining planning permission for housing-led development, which separates the consideration of matters of principle for proposed development from the technical detail of the development. The permission in principle consent route has two stages. The first stage, or permission in principle stage, establishes whether a site is suitable in principle, and the second, technical details consent stage, is when the detailed development proposals are assessed. In considering the permission in principle application, consideration is limited to matters of location, land use, and the amount of development. Further details of the proposals are to be considered in the future at the technical details consent stage. In terms of site location, the site comprises a parcel of land of approximately 0.16 hectares in size, located to the rear of properties at 14 to 20 Barbourne Road, which is situated on the east side of Barbourne Road. The site currently contains existing garage blocks and a lawn area to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road. Whiston Court Retirement Village is located to the east of the site, whilst a car garage is located to the south of the site, along with residential apartments at 12 Barbourne Road. The site is located within two conservation areas, the garage block lying within the Shrubbery Avenue Conservation Area and the lawned area being within the Foregate Street and the Tithing Conservation Area. The properties at 14 to 20 Barbourne Road are Grade 2 listed buildings. An indicative site plan is shown on the slide. The next slide shows some photographs of the site. This image shows the entrance to the site access track from Barbourne Road. For context, this slide shows the front of the Grade 2 listed buildings at 14 to 20 Barbourne Road. The next slide shows some images of the garage blocks to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road, which are proposed to be demolished as part of these proposals. Whiston Court Retirement Village is also seen in this photo to the rear of the site. This slide shows the garages in context with the listed buildings on Barbourne Road. This slide again shows the access to the site from Barbourne Road. The next slide shows some aerial images of the site from different angles. This slide shows an indicative site plan which shows a potential layout of the proposed 5 dwellings with garden areas to the rear and parking to the front. The indicative layout shows the proposed dwellings could be largely constructed on the site of the existing garage blocks, which is proposed to demolish. Although at this stage neither design, layout nor appearance are under consideration, it is anticipated that the dwellings would take the form of 3-storey townhouses, each with 3 bedrooms. Indicative floor plans for the dwellings are shown on the slide, and the dwellings are indicated to be 126 square metres in size. Each house is also proposed to have 2 car parking spaces to the front with a private garden area to the rear. It is indicated that the existing vehicular access to the site is likely to be retained and utilised to serve the proposed dwellings. When considering an application for permission in principle, as mentioned, consideration is limited to matters of location, land use and amount of development. At present, the proposed development site is considered to be a windfall site. Policy SWDP 2 Part B details that windfall development proposals will be assessed in accordance with the settlement hierarchy set out in Table 2. Worcester City sits at the top of the settlement hierarchy as the administrative centre of the county and the provider of the greatest range of services. The application proposes residential development within an established residential area. It is therefore considered that the principle of residential land use is compatible with the adjoining land uses. The site is also considered to be within a well-accessed location of the city, with a bus stop located close to the site. So the site forms partly a brownfield site, that is previously developed land, around the location of the existing garage block, and partially a greenfield site around the existing lawned area. The NPPF supports the retention of garden areas in appropriate locations where character should be maintained. The South Worcestershire Development Plan does not include a specific restrictive policy to prevent the use of garden areas for development, other than the reference within Strategic Policy SWDP 2 that seeks to encourage the focus of development on brownfield land. In this regard, it is considered there is a minor policy harm in respect of strategic policy, although this is considered limited and does not outweigh the acceptability of the development in principle. With regard to heritage matters, the site is located within 2 conservation areas and is located to the rear of Grade 2 listed buildings at 14 to 20 Barbourne Road. The erection of up to 5 dwellings in this location would not adversely impact on any important views, spaces, or remove items of acknowledged character within these areas. The removal of the incompatible garage blocks would not cause harm to the conservation area in principle. Therefore, from a location perspective, the proposal would result in a neutral impact on the conservation area. Consideration of the impact of the design, layout, massing and other aspects of the proposal will be considered at the technical details stage, including any assessment of harm against public benefits. It should be noted that the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review identifies the site to the rear of 14 to 20 Barbourne Road as a small housing allocation for an indicative number of 5 dwellings. In allocating this site for housing, heritage considerations were addressed through the supporting evidence base. The site was considered suitable for allocation subject to future development proposals, demonstrating that heritage assets and their settings would be conserved in accordance with national and local planning policy. With regard to the amount of development, it is considered that in principle the site is likely to have the capacity to accommodate up to 5 dwellings in an appropriate manner. The amount of development proposed in this application aligns with the indicative number of dwellings in the emerging site allocation for housing within the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review, reflecting the scale envisaged. The South Worcestershire Development Plan Review has reached an advanced stage, hearings having concluded and a main modifications consultation underway, with the inspector's report and adoption anticipated in the spring, subject to the outcome of the consultation. As mentioned, the site is proposed as a housing allocation within the emerging plan. Although limited weight can be afforded to emerging policies at this stage, the allocation is a material consideration in the determination of this application, particularly in respect of the principle of development and the assessment of location. The emerging allocation demonstrates that in principle, the council considers the site as suitable for residential development, subject to detailed matters being addressed at a later stage. It should also be noted that the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply with only 2.37 years identified. Consequently, paragraph 11D of the NPPF is engaged and planning permission should be granted unless the application of policies in the NPPF that protects areas or assets of particular importance, provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposed, or any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. This means a so-called tilted balance is in effect when weighing the planning balance of the proposal. The proposal would contribute to housing delivery in a sustainable location, and there are no identified strong reasons for refusal in respect of heritage. Any potential adverse impacts are limited, localised and capable of being addressed at the technical detail stage. The concerns raised by Councillor Cooper regarding the proposed felling of trees on the site and the water management plan are noted, but these matters do not fall under the scope of what can be considered at the permission in principle stage and are matters which will be considered at the technical detail stage. In conclusion, the proposal represents sustainable development. The benefits of housing delivery in a sustainable urban location on a site identified for residential use in the emerging plan significantly outweigh the minor policy tensions or potential adverse effects. The scheme accords with the test for permission in principle, and having considered all material planning considerations, officers recommend that permission in principle is granted. This concludes the officer presentation.
Thank you very much. I have Mr. and Mrs. Gannon, who are here from Strong Era Limited, who are the applicants. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Much of which is going to emulate the councillor's comments. So good afternoon, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all here today. This is a permission in principle application for the construction of 5 dwellings on the site. This site and matters have been considered in the South Worcestershire Development Plan. The council have already deemed this site suitable and allocated this site for 5 residential units. Your professional planning officers have recommended approval of the application as set out in the committee report. and the stated reasons for referral to this committee meeting are noted and would be taken into consideration at any subsequent technical details application. However, those matters are technical details and not for the consideration at this planning in principle stage, which is confirmed on the committee report. It is somewhat surprising, therefore, that this permission in principle application has been called to committee. As a permission in principle application, the scope for assessment is strictly limited to location, land use and amount of development. These matters have effectively already been considered and found to be acceptable within the South Worcestershire Development Plan for allocation of the site for 5 dwellings. As members will be aware, the Council has a significant housing and land supply shortfall of just 2.37 years, and as such, in accordance with the NPPF, planning permission should only be not granted when the adverse impacts of a development significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The contribution that these dwellings would make to the current shortfall in housing supply in the district is afforded significant weight in favour of the scheme in the planning balance. As per the conclusions of the committee report, the site's designation as a housing allocation demonstrates that it is suitable, available and achievable, and the scale of development aligns with the emerging plan in paragraphs 48-49 of the National Planning Policy Framework. And that confirms the emerging allocations may be treated as a material consideration where relevant, particularly when the allocation is advanced in the plan-making process, as is the case here. The proposal would contribute to housing delivery in a sustainable location in accordance with national policy objectives, and there are no identified strong reasons for refusal in respect of any heritage. Any potential adverse impacts are limited and localised and capable of being addressed at the technical detail stage. The proposed development seeks to replace a row of existing garages that are no longer fit for purpose, and they do detract from the character and indeed the safety of the local area. Their removal and redevelopment would result in a marked improvement to the local environment, addressing long-standing issues associated with underutilised structures and eliminating opportunities for antisocial or undesirable activity. In light of the recent serious incidents on the site that I'm sure everybody is aware of in the room, the proposal to introduce well-designed residential housing is considered to deliver a clear and lasting benefit, contributing positively to both community safety and the overall quality of the area. The proposed development has been subject to a thorough assessment by the Planning Department and found to be acceptable in all aspects and represents sustainable development. So with that in mind, I would ask that the members endorse the recommendation of their professional planning officers and please approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. You're well within your time. Can I open the floor for questions? I've got Councillor Round to kick us off. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. It's actually a procedural matter which, rather than asking questions, Mr Gannon has already touched on it, but it's a procedural point as in, why is this before Planning Committee? I know it's being called in and it's an outline application in principle, but why is it before us when surely we're just talking about very basic points about location and in principle, and the points that have been raised by Councillor Cooper to call it in on matters that are really not relevant at this stage. So surely it should be called in at a later stage and not now. That's just seek procedural guidance, please.
I'm happy to pick that up, and through you, Chair, members will be aware of the calling procedure asks for provision of material planning considerations. They are material planning considerations, even though that the consideration has been that they are for a later date. The calling process takes it out of the delegated powers, and that calling process ensures that it comes to Planning Committee. That is a choice of any member of this council to do for any planning application that's within their ward, and that's the reason why it's before Planning Committee.
Councillor Agar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A question from Mr and Mrs Gannon. Can you tell the committee why you decided to bring a planning in principle application rather than the full application to us?
Because there are many detailed matters that would need to be decided at a further stage, so just to establish that the site has the right location, that it has the right residential use, and that those matters are important for us to consider first. Obviously, it's an expense that we don't want to go through if those matters aren't considered approved.
Any other questions? Councillor Kimberley.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you'll permit me this one. I was just looking through the report, and obviously there's various aspects to this. Because it's permission in principle that you're applying for, there are some things which aren't fully in scope, but I was reading through the report, and there's a couple of responses from officers where they've essentially said, we can't offer feedback because this is permission in principle, but there are concerns that have been raised. One of the particular ones, and it certainly stood out to me at the site visit, was really around access to the potential site. It does seem to have very restricted and very limited access. I assume that has factored into your calculations in applying for this permission, because presumably your design is that houses will exist there at some point in the future. Is that something that you've thought deeply about?
Yes, we have had a topographical survey, which means that we've actually measured the site very detailed for previous planning application that was considered a number of years ago. So we are aware of the constraints of the site, and we will deal with the matters of access at a later stage. But yeah, we are aware that that doesn't create a survivability issue.
The reason I ask is because, you know, as I was walking down the access route to actually get to this site, I thought, you know, you've already got a narrow passageway that a vehicle must navigate to get into, and the narrow passageway, the narrow portion, would be considerably extended if you were to bring properties to that front boundary where the red line sits. And I could very well foresee some difficulties for you if you were bringing specific planning applications. It's just a thought. And again, I just wanted to ask, have you given thought to where the sort of frontages of the properties would actually sit, or is that just for a later date?
I would think that was probably for a later date, if we could just pass that on to the technical stage. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kimberley. It's a principle that we could put things anywhere on the site, I think, that we're looking at. Councillor Cross now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us today. Little puzzled. For a permission in principle application, there's a lot of detail in there which isn't really relevant for us at this point. I mean, it's always, you know, it's always nice to understand what an intention is, but actually that has no bearing, you know, there's a lot of detail in here that has no bearing on our decision-making today, or should have no bearing on our decision-making today. And just wanted to check with you as to why so much detail provided when it's not needed at this stage. Is it the case that, is it arising, for example, from a change of mind to actually go for a permission in principle, having actually already initially prepared for a full
No, not at all. So it's a great question, Councillor, and I think I have a philosophy of saying better to have and not need. And at this point, we've instructed all of the relevant parties around us and professional parties around us that have offered to do as much as they have done to this point. So we've submitted that for you. I know it's not relevant at this stage, but hopefully, after today's decision, it might be.
Thank you.
Councillor Udall.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm trying to tread carefully here because I don't want to touch on issues which would be for a later stage. But an issue which always does concern me about such a project as this, the archaeological issues. And I noticed from the report which we have in front of us that there's a Roman site here or adjacent to this site, and they are suggesting a trench evaluation may be required. My question is, are you aware of that history of the site, of the archaeological background to the site? And how comfortable would you be moving forwards for trench investigations to take place to make sure that this site doesn't lose Roman remains for good?
Thank you. Again, perhaps bordering on to the technicality side, but I will answer to the best of my ability. Yes, we are aware. And yes, we are prepared to work with any agency in order to make sure that this is done respectfully and make sure that we don't damage any heritage that may or may not be found on the site when it becomes necessary.
Thank you. That reassures.
Do I have any other questions? Oh, Councillor Rand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming to committee today. I just have one question, which I think you know. Bearing in mind that this is just an application in principle, it's just a very basic outline, really. I'm sure, but just for the purpose of the committee, you're going to work with the office. If you are granted permission in principle today, I'm sure you'll happily provide whatever reports and work with officers. Is that your intention, to try and get as much detail as possible so that when it does come to committee again, you'll have all the reports necessary and we'll have the full picture? Is that your intention?
It is.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for coming along. It's been very useful. You'd like to take your seats back. And if I'll open the floor for questions, please. Councillor Udall.
Yeah, a question, if I may, and it's on the issue which I asked the applicant about, the heritage issue with the Roman archaeological site on the potentially adjacent to or on the site. What powers do we have at this stage, in the plan and in principle stage, to ensure that when we consider this at a detailed stage, that is taken into account in the process? Can we flag up, alert, illustrate the concerns that we need to ensure that what is left of our Roman history in the city is protected?
I'll happy to pick that up, and through you, Chair. Whilst not required to do by legislation, you'll notice in section 9 we've included an informative that actually sets out the details. As part of that includes heritage statement, including heritage impact assessment, and also a bit further down archaeology assessment as well, which includes geophys survey and desk-based assessments as well as trench evaluation. So I think it's really important just to sort of expand upon that answer, and it's not really the question you asked, but it'll help. The planning, in principle, the PIP process provides from 1 to 5 dwellings. So it's up to 5 dwellings. So in terms of when we're looking at technical, or when members or officers are looking at technical details consent, we will have the information from the archaeology. If that means that there is something that needs to be preserved, it might mean that there's only 1 unit on there, or it could be that there's nothing there to be preserved, that we can have the 5 units. So all of the details, and it probably goes on to answer some other questions, but those detailed reports will frame the quantity in technical details stage of the number of units on there, where they're to be located, what it's going to look like, how they're going to be accessed, how many cars are going to be provided there, is it going to be car free? All of those things that might be tumbling through members' minds and officers' minds will all be dealt with at technical details consent stage.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reassured by that, and clearly it's something which we'll come back to if and when we get to a technical detailed plan application stage.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Amos, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two questions before we come on to the subsequent debate on it. And it's picking up something Mr. Round said earlier. Yes, it's an application in principle, but it's not an application for development as such. It's for up to 5 dwellings. So the number of dwellings is important, because we're not just being asked, can we have development on that site? We're saying that we're being asked, can they have development on that site for up to 5 dwellings? That's the first question. And the other question was about access, which I think Mr. Round may have said was, or you said, Chair, matter for a later discussion. But surely it can't be, because if we're considering whether or not this is suitable for development, access to it, to get to it, must be relevant now, not at a subsequent stage. Because if we think you can't have access to this site, then it is clearly not suitable for development.
Through you, Chair. First question, Councillor Amos, you are correct. The application is for up to 5 dwellings. as we indicated earlier. In terms of the second point, in terms of location, yes, the access is a consideration, but you've got to look at the access in terms of a consideration in principle of 1 to 5 units. And that consideration, as I intimated earlier, could be that it's car-free. It could be that it's reduced number of car parking spaces. And we're not into the details of the number at this stage. So in terms of balancing access from those existing garages that are already there, that could be occupied, against 5 units, that's not the balancing stage, because we're not sure at this detail of how many they're going to propose. So is there an access there? Yes. From an officer's point of view, yes, there is. Could it be suitable for 1 to 5 units on in a theoretical way that could be provided either car-free or for lesser number of units or lesser number of car parking spaces? There is an infinite number of elements that you're looking at. So that's into the detail stage already. So what we're looking at, in principle, could it be accessed in a way? And officer's opinion is that it can.
Gosh, right. Wait a minute. I had 4 hands go up at the same time then. I'll just go around in order. Councillor Cross, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Listening carefully to the wording about access and is it relevant and a relevant consideration. The access that is not just purely for the inhabitants of the property, but also for things like refuse collection, or is there an anticipation that that is actually going into too much detail? I don't know, because I mean, fundamentally there would need to be recycling collection, and I'm just then wondering to what extent it then becomes part of an access consideration or not in terms of bin lorries, etc.
Through you, Chair. Members who went on the site visit will have noticed that there are residential properties already at the rear of that, which are accessed from the access road. So in terms of waste and recycling, I think members can have confidence that in principle that can be arranged. But as members will also be aware, there are properties within the city that have no direct vehicular access, that only have pedestrian access, and they are still served by our refuge collections. So there is a waste management process, isn't there, that will be considered at technical details consent stage of how that can be done. And consultation will take place with the city services, and an arrangement and suitable arrangements will be made in that respect.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really struggling with this application in terms of that it's before committee, because a lot of the questions that have been asked has already been identified by officers, that these matters are all going to be addressed at the detailed stage. And my question to the applicants was, were they going to be working with officers to do what reports and obviously address any concerns that were being raised, highways, access, those kind of issues. And in fact, the only reason it's being called in because the local councillors raised concerns about matters that are at the detailed planning consent. So, you know, it's just an application in principle about location and very basic elements. I think we're tying ourselves up in knots here.
Sorry, was there a question? No. Right. I mean, there were objections received from neighbours, I believe, as well. And actually there was some support. So there we go. Councillor Kimbley.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a couple of questions which will help me weigh up in my mind how to sort of approach this. I've got 2 questions which may be quite broad, may be quite specific. If we were to feel, and I'm not going to put you too much on the spot with a hypothetical question, but if we were to feel that there is no physical way to fit up to 5 properties on the location, if we thought the maximum number that could be fit as a subjective calculation was lower than that, let's say 1 to 2, 1 to 3, what options do we have to address that? or to approach that as members of the committee. I also would like to ask about the question of amenity. To what extent are we permitted to consider the amenity provided by the existing green space, which will be lost to residents in the immediate surrounds? Lastly, I'm thinking again about the trees. If we consider, as the tree officer has said, in a detailed application, they would then likely advise against the removal of these trees. If we at this stage know that that is likely, how much can we consider that at this point, if that makes sense? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, three answers. Firstly, in terms of the amount, if members felt that 5 units could not be satisfied, that's an amount question. So that's part of your consideration of, can 5 units be put on there? What officers have set out within the report is that they consider that that is acceptable, and an indicative plan has been shown, roughly showing that the number can be fitted on. And also, you'll be aware of the work that has been done as part of the South Worcestershire Development Plan review that has gone into a lot of detail to consider whether the indicative number of 5 set out within that allocation is suitable. So one of those weighting factors that members will look at as part of the planning balance is the details that's coming as part of the allocation with an indicative number of 5. That's part of your considerations in terms of amount. In terms of the amenity that the land provides, yes, that has been considered, and you'll notice within the report that's been taken account of, particularly in respect of the conservation areas, and noted that there is no protection over that amenity area. There are, within conservation areas, there are spaces that are protected, and this is not one such space. In terms of the amenity for residents, specifically private amenity for residents, that's a technical detail of matters consent stage. In terms of the trees, again, that does come into location, but again, we're into that range of, well, actually, we're looking at technical details because we haven't got a tree impact assessment, we haven't got a tree survey. So in terms of, are those trees suitable for retention? I don't know, and members don't know. And actually, we don't need to know at this stage. That will help and inform the number, the position, and all the elements of those dwellings going forward. So in terms of your consideration, I would say that that is not one for your consideration at this stage. The amenity and location, yes, but that's set out within the report. The amount, yes, and again, that's been set out within the report.
Is that okay? Thank you. I've got Councillor Agar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I have a huge problem with up to 5 houses in this location, but Mr. Round, I hope you can tell me. I'm struggling with amount at the moment in some ways, and I feel as if the intrusion of additional gardens into that space would feel like overdevelopment. But whether or not I can consider that at this stage is an interesting question. You might consider it to be green space and you might not. It is certainly part of the development that's proposed.
Through you, Chair, in terms of the format and the arrangement of those garden areas, we don't know what that looks like at this stage. And again, I think as the officer set out within her presentation, we're looking at a red line plan, and that alone, we don't know the format of whether these properties are to have gardens or not, and whether it's going to be one large shared area of amenity space that is shared with a number of residents. There's lots of permutations that could arrive at a technical detail stage. So that format and how that interaction with that area of private space that's undeveloped at the moment will work, we don't know, and that's not really for our consideration at this stage.
Thank you for clarifying that for all of us, because I think we needed to know whether or not it was considered as amenity space, whether or not it was going to be considered as green space, because we know that those are technical details. But was it actually going to be considered as part of the amount of the development or not?
Councillor Rudge, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My observation from visiting the site was that the garages are extremely ugly and messy, and they would benefit from some development. I think it would be, whatever that looks like, I think that would be an improvement. My only question is, and if this is a technical question, tell me to shut up, but let's say the proposed was 3 houses, townhouses. Is there a limit on height? That's my lot.
You were correct in your assumption. That's at a technical detail stage.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Rudge, yeah, at the site visit, there was a disparity between the garages and the adjacent Grade 2 listed buildings, I would say. Do I have any other questions, or would people be prepared to move to debate? Yep, okay. Who wants to kick us off? Councillor Cross, then Councillor Amos, then Councillor Barnes. Thank you.
So, our hands very much tied. We're limited to location, land use and amount of development, and reference to all our documents as set out in the officer's report, the MPPF, the SWDPR, the policies in there. I don't see massive conflicts in there. The concerns raised that I've seen, and I have plenty of questions to ask at a technical detail stage, but at this stage, I'm kind of scratching my head to find anything to really hang any reason to not move forwards on this. So yeah, I'll put my hat in and when the time comes, propose that we accept this, that we grant permission in principle.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cross. I will park that. We've got Councillor Amos, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure about this application. I mean, in principle, applications always bother me in the sense that they may be misconstrued as giving an applicant carte blanche to do what they want. In other words, got planning permission, then they come back and say, well, look, we've got planning permission, we're just talking about the details. But I think a development like this is not detail. I think development of this are big decisions and big issues. It's not just, we keep talking about technical details. They're more than that, Chair. They're much more than that. So I think we need to establish that. And obviously, if you sell land with planning permission, you're going to get a lot more for it than if you sell land without planning permission. So I'm not saying it's the case here, but it could be in other cases. And also, this infill bothers me, Chair. And perhaps Mr. Round could, when I finish talking, he could just clarify this. But I get the impression that some people may be thinking that because of our position on land supply, that basically anything that comes along we have to approve because it helps our land supply position. But that is not the case, I'm sure. So I don't think we should be using our land supply deficiency to simply wave anything through. Because infill is a bit of a problem, isn't it? I mean, this is not a green lung, this bit of land, by any means, but it is a lung. Just because there's a bit of derelict land or semi-derelict land doesn't mean we have to build on it. We've got to have an application to get rid of it, and we're doing that too much in the city. And looking at the other aspects, Chair, I mean, reading through the report, it starts by saying it's located within 2 conservation areas. So I thought, well, take that into account. Then we're told that 14 to 20 Barbourne Road are Grade 2 listed buildings, so that's important. But the good thing was it said each house is going to have 2 car parking spaces. So I thought, well, that's good news. But then I go on to read what highways have said, and I just highlight some of the bits very quickly. It talks about all other matters it can't comment on, so just the bits where it can comment on. It said, however, the proposal as shown, in other words, the application we're considering, is likely to attract a negative response at the technical details consent stage. It then goes on to say, blah, 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 a subsequent application is likely to attract a deferral. But the thing that bothers me about what Highways has said, Chair, it says insufficient information at this stage. So basically, maybe in principle, but clearly Highways seem to think they can't comment because they haven't got enough information even for an in-principle decision. So, we can't, I get the impression with this, everything has got to be deferred to a later stage. All we've got to do is wave it through at the moment. And frankly, Chair, I don't think I'm prepared to wave this through at the moment. And it would be much simpler as we invariably get, well, not invariably, but most of the time, we get an application for the right to develop and the details of the development, and that is a much better way to proceed. So I've got concerns about this, Chair.
Through you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Amos for raising those points. If I can go backwards, three things I think we mentioned. In terms of highways, you'll also notice within that first paragraph from the Highways Officer that they highlight that there's no objection can be raised because of this. However, as you say, it's likely to attract a negative at technical detail stage. And the Highways Authority have done that in the correct way. They've considered that they cannot comment at this stage because there's no detail, but actually there's no details anyway because we're at this planning permission, the permission in principle stage. So the Highway Authority have raised no objections to the principle, but actually that's going to be a really critical matter, and you're absolutely right, Councillor Amos, that is a really important matter to consider at the technical detail stage. In terms of the infill and the area of the green that is to be taken, I would agree again with you that we are not using, and hopefully members will see across our reports, both delegated and committee, we're not supporting every single development that comes forward just because we've got a shortage of housing land supply. However, it would be wrong of us, and legally wrong of us, not to include that within the report as a consideration. So we have to say that we are in the tilty balance. But this has to be considered. And as part of that consideration, this has been allocated as part of the review as an allocation for Worcester in terms of a provision. So it's not something that we are just saying any site will do. This site has been through site selection. It has been considered as part of the technical elements that the local plan review has got to allow this to be allocated as part of a proposal that is coming forward. And just finally, I think it would be helpful just to identify by a decision today to approve this does not give it planning permission. And I think that's really important for members to understand. If it was an outline planning permission, you would be granting planning permission. If it was a full planning permission, you'd be granting planning permission. But what the government is very clear at is that permission in principle does not give planning permission. It needs the technical detail stage to give it planning permission. So if an approval is given today, the applicants will go away with a permission in principle. They won't go away with a planning permission because they need the add-on. And if they cannot get the add-on because the technical details say that it's unacceptable, they cannot get planning permission. This is stage one. They need stage two. So unlike outline planning permission, where, and I think members will be aware, we're into, you've already granted outline planning permission, there's nothing that you can do any further, we've got to resolve the details. This is a little bit harder. This is simply a red line to say yes in principle, but there is an added element which the applicants will need to go through to be able to get planning permission, and that's not a certainty, and the government has made that absolutely clear in their guidance. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Barnes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the PIP is sort of, as far as I'm concerned, it's given almost by now. However, I think what's muddied the water is what's on the indicative drawings, which has challenged a lot of us. I think most people would be very happy that the garages went and that brownfield area was built on. People are probably or maybe less comfortable with building on greenfield, especially a greenfield that is, say, 200-300 years old, based on where it sits with the buildings around it. So this is almost like a London Square, where people in London Square had the benefit of going out into an open space. So I'm satisfied that the PIP should happen, but I think we're going to need to pay a lot more attention to what comes back next. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I think, yeah, as I think what we've got to be very, very careful of is, at the moment we're discussing this such a lot, and I do worry about what message we're sending out to small scale. I mean, I don't know the applicant's details or what have you, but I worry about the message that we're sending out to people who want to develop sites in Worcester. And the applicants have already said that the reason that they've come openly to make an application for permission in principle is because the costs that are associated with making detailed applications are extortionate and would put many small-scale developers off making an application to develop a site. So I think that the applicants have done the right thing, come for a permission in principle. It's not a planning consent. It's just the idea of testing the water to find out what the issues are. Everything will come at the detailed stage at a later on. And I'm sure that the applicants, I'm sorry, I'm speaking for the applicants here, I don't know, but I'm sure at that point, they will then spend the money that's needed to do all the detailed reports that are necessary to come before planning committee at a later stage with the details. But I think we've got to be careful about what message we're sending out as a committee to developers about what they can and cannot develop, and what we're giving them a difficult time. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we are giving them a difficult time, but I'm saying that we are really going over this an awful lot. That's just my view. So I really think we should be going towards voting for a vote on this.
Okay, I have got Councillor Agar.
Thank you. I think it's worth just reminding ourselves, you made some very complex comments about iterations of the development plan, Paul, and I think it's worth reminding ourselves that we're very close to the point where we have to choose whether or not we adopt that. We would probably be doing that in March. So that has some bearing on what we're considering today, I think, certainly on the policy aspect. Because the decision we make today, I don't really want to see us reversing it a few weeks down the line. That would be daft. So on a policy and strategic level, I can see no reason not to approve a permission in principle. I think what I would like to see, and what people are struggling with around the room, is the material considerations that come at the technical stage. So I would like very much to see this come back to us for that kind of consideration and discussion at committee when that occurs. So as long as we get that, I can't see why we would really object to this permission in principle.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Agar. Councillor Udall.
I was going to say something very similar to what Councillor Agar has just said. I've got plenty of questions and plenty of issues and concerns about the detail. I haven't got any concerns about the principle. I think the development on this site is going to happen at some point in the future, if not now. And I think that we need to bear that in mind and actually accept that planning and principle is something which we can accept. I do have those concerns about the design and the consequences and the much more detailed aspects of a potential future application. And bearing that in mind, I would like to propose that we accept planning and principle with a proviso that we do have the detailed application come back before us as members of this planning committee, so the issues and concerns which we do have about the detail can be considered in public at an open meeting of the committee, if and when that happens. Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay, I just want to clarify something. Councillor Cross, did you say that you would propose, or did you propose?
I think we have discussed, I personally feel we've discussed this enough
No, before, did you propose when you spoke?
Oh, I do propose.
No, not now. Did
Okay.
you before, when you
Yes.
first spoke? You did. So you would therefore be, the seconder. Okay, great. So I've just got Councillor Kimberley who'd like to speak. Would you still like to speak, or are you done?
Yeah, I'll just keep it very brief. I think, given the scope of what we're talking about, it basically echoing what colleagues have said, because we're discussing permission in principle, there's a lot of things which are out of scope. I think there are concerns that I would definitely want to sort of press, and I hope that officers will be working to raise those concerns as the conversation goes towards developing a more detailed plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kimberley. So just to confirm, I've got proposer Councillor Cross, seconder Councillor Udall. We're not proposing any amendments or anything, so are we therefore happy to move to a vote?
Can I ask for, if and when the application does become a full application when it does come before us? Or would that wait to the time when a call-in would be required?
Yes, to the latter part, it would need a call-in at that stage. If ward members or any councillor feels that it needs to be considered by committee, they have the call-in procedures. If obviously they consider that it's the most perfect application that they've ever seen, and they don't necessarily need to bring it before this committee.
Can I therefore see all votes in favour? Thank you. Votes against? And that's everyone, so that has carried. Thank you. So we'll now, what time is it? 4:15. Is everyone all right to carry on without a break? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 4:20. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're starting back with, going back to agenda item 8. This is the land adjacent to 21 Henwick Road, and we're going to have an officer presentation from Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 8 relates to an application for full planning permission for the erection of a 2-bedroom infill dwelling adjacent to 21 Henwick Road, the Grosvenor Arms Public House. The application is referred to the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Udall as a result of concerns relating to vehicular access from Grosvenor Walk and the impact upon pedestrian safety. I would first like to draw members' attention to the late paper in respect of this item, which seeks to provide clarity in relation to condition numbering, as well as propose 2 additional conditions, one relating to archaeology, one as recommended by the archaeological officer, and one relating to the submission of a landscaping scheme. For clarity and consistency in the condition numbering, I'd also like to just state that the wording of condition 7 should be amended so that the phrase notwithstanding condition 1 is in fact replaced with notwithstanding condition 6, and an additional condition in relation to drainage is also recommended by the drainage officer, is also added to the officer recommendation. Now looking at the site's location here, indicated by the red line on the location plan. The application is located at Grosvenor Arms Public House. The site is an existing gap between the Grosvenor Public House and the adjacent modern terrace properties, which were given planning permission under application P15 K0370. Identified on the plan as 21A to 21C Henwick Road. Henwick Road is a busy road within the St John's area leading into Worcester City. The application site is not a listed building and it's not located within a conservation area. However, the St John's Conservation Area is located on the opposite side of the road, opposite the Grosvenor Arms pub to the south of the site. There are also some listed buildings opposite the site, including St Clement's Church, number 28 and number 30 Henwick Road, all of which are Grade 2 listed. I've included some 3D Google Earth extracts here, just showing the site's location indicated by the blue star. The application site is a brownfield site and is located within a well-established residential area. The proposed dwelling would share the rear access, as can be seen on the slide, that runs alongside the public house, with parking for 1 vehicle within the rear garden. Now just a different perspective, panning around to the frontage. Now just looking at some site photos of the street scenes, characterised by the existing row of brick and rendered terrace dwellings with projecting first floor rendered elements. The Grosvenor Arms on the other side, however, has a more traditional design with dormer windows to its roof slope. There are double yellow lines in front of where the proposed dwelling would be sited. However, some street parking is possible, as can be seen in use in front of the warning sign for the level crossing. Now moving around to the rear of the proposed dwelling, accessed off the road corner between Grosvenor Walk, Henwick Road and Bromyard Terrace. Neighbouring properties at 2A and 2B Grosvenor Walk are shown on the top left photo on the entrance to the shared rear access. Now on the top right photo showing the rear of the pub on the opposite side of the access, existing parking area servicing neighbouring properties can be seen towards the end of the access. Bottom left photo here just showing where the proposed dwelling is to be sited as viewed from the rear. And the bottom right photo just looking back to the entrance of the shared access. Now looking at the site plan, the proposed dwelling has a depth of approximately 10.32 metres, designed to match the depth of the existing dwellings within the modern terrace. The proposed dwelling has a side access running alongside the pub of approximately 1.3 metres. The proposed dwelling would also benefit from 1 vehicular parking space to the rear of the dwelling, along with secure and easily accessible cycle parking sited to the frontage. The Highway Authority have commented on the proposals and advised that they have no objections subject to conditions and a series of informative notes. In line with the parking standards set out within the Streetscape Design Guide, a total of 2 vehicular parking spaces are required for a 2-bedroom dwelling. The Highway Authority, however, advise in their comments that the provision of 1 parking space for the proposed dwelling is accepted on the basis that previous permissions for the dwellings, numbers 21A, B and C, have been accepted with 1 space. Officers also note that the site is a sustainable location within a 7-minute walk of St John's High Street, close to Worcester City itself. There are 2 bus stops nearby on Henwick Road. Queries are also raised by officers with regard to the existing parking arrangement, as it appears that the area where the proposed dwelling is to be sited adjacent to the pub is currently used by vehicles. The agent, however, advised that there are no allocated parking for the pub on the application site, and that the parking there is currently just an informal arrangement. In addition to this, concerns were also raised with regard to the surfacing of the existing parking area. The agent confirmed that the landowner and applicant are willing to agree to resurfacing of this area. Condition 6 of the officer report secures this by requiring the access, parking and turning area to be adequately surfaced and drained. It is acknowledged that due to the level difference between the rear garden and the parking area, access to the vehicular parking is not ideal, as there is no direct connection between the parking area and the rear garden. However, given the site's sustainable location, the proposal is considered acceptable on balance in this regard, as subject to the conditions set out in section 9 of the report. Now looking at the proposed elevations and the design of the dwellings, members will note that this is intended to replicate the existing adjacent modern properties within the road terraces, with vertical emphasis through first floor projecting bay and a combination of render and red brick finishes. Some initial queries were raised by officers in relation to the proposed dwelling being slightly wider than the existing dwellings within the road terraces, and why, in fact, the dwelling would need to be larger than the adjacent dwellings. The agent explained that the dwelling's increased width ensures compliance with the nationally described space standards, which require a 2-bedroom dwelling to have a minimum floor area of 79 metres squared. The proposed dwelling measures approximately 82 metres squared, exceeding this requirement. While the increased width does have some visual detriment and may slightly disrupt the symmetry of the terrace, the benefits of an improved occupier amenity and the addition of a dwelling on a brownfield site are considered to outweigh this minor detriment to the street scene. Officers are also mindful that given the siting of the proposed dwelling with the pub projecting forward of the dwelling, there are unlikely to be many vantage points where any harm resulting from the increased width would be noticeable from. The garden area is approximately 47 metres squared, which exceeds the South Worcestershire Design Guide requirement of 40 metres squared for a 2-bedroom dwelling. It is acknowledged that the proposed dwelling is sited adjacent to a pub, so therefore noise and disruption is a consideration. The surrounding context is, however, predominantly residential, with several existing dwellings already located in close proximity to the pub, demonstrating that such a relationship can coexist without causing undue harm to living conditions. Furthermore, any prospective occupants would be aware of the presence of the operation of the pub when choosing to rent or purchase the property. Overall, given the existing mixed character of the area, the proposed dwelling is not anticipated to experience an unacceptable level of noise disturbance. With regard to neighbouring amenity, it's recognised that the development may cause some temporary noise and disturbance during construction. To mitigate these, conditions are recommended for a construction traffic management plan and also restricted working hours and hours for deliveries. No third-party comments or objections have been received during the course of the application. Councillor Udall's concerns regarding parking and access have been reviewed carefully with the Highway Authority, and it is considered that the proposals will not result in an unacceptable impact on parking or highway safety. Aside from the minor harm to the street scene as a result of the increased width of the dwelling compared to the existing, it is considered that the proposed dwelling would not detract unacceptably from the character and appearance of the surrounding area or appear as an overdevelopment of the site. It is also considered that it would not cause undue harm to residential amenity of neighbours. The proposals also provide some benefits in terms of social, environmental and economic, including the provision of an additional residential unit, making a small but important contribution to the council's housing land supply shortage, and also noting the considerations of paragraph 11D of the NPPF as outlined in paragraph 7.7 of the officer report. The proposals would provide temporary employment during the construction of the dwelling. Officers therefore conclude that there are no evidence impacts or substantial harms that are derived from development that would demonstrably, so significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing one residential unit in the context of a housing land supply deficit of 2.37 years against the requirement for a 5-year housing land supply. It's therefore concluded that development accords with the development plan taken as a whole. Officers therefore recommend that planning permission is approved subject to the conditions set out in section 9 of the officer report, along with the additional conditions just relating to archaeology, landscaping and drainage as set out in your late papers and as mentioned as the start of my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Laura. I don't know whether it would be helpful. I know that we've looked at the late paper with conditions on it, but you mentioned some other changes. Could we just go through it to make sure it's very clear for everybody? If you've got your... You want people to have their late paper to hand?
You'll probably need both.
Okay.
So I apologise for that. So if, in terms of the conditions, there's a slight discrepancy as well on the late paper that I've spotted as well. So conditions 1 to 5 are all fine. When we get to what should be condition 6, you'll see on page 24 that it is number 1. So that should be 6 and then runs 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So I think that makes it clear. Within condition, what should be condition 7, it says notwithstanding condition 1. That should say condition 6. So notwithstanding condition 6. If we just turn to the late papers, there is, in the beginning of the late paper, it says 1 to 9 is as read. Unfortunately, we've missed out condition 8, which was cycle parking. So that should be conditions 1 to 10 are as read. Then the additional archaeology condition is condition 11. The landscaping condition is condition 12. And then as Laura set out within her officer presentation, there is a 13th condition, which is for drainage to the property. I think that should be clear and members should understand what officers are recommending approval for.
So we have unlucky for some, 13 conditions now. Great.
Lucky for some.
Unlucky for others. Okay, great.
Whereabouts would I see the wording for condition 13, please?
You haven't got the wording, unfortunately, for that. That was something that officers picked up after the late papers. But if members are concerned about the wording, it can be something that can be agreed with Chair and Vice Chair, but it will be a standard condition that is normally applied in terms of details to be provided in terms of foul and surface water drainage to be submitted to and approved in writing by the local authority, and that those approved details are carried out in accordance with those approved details. So it's a standard condition that you'd expect in terms of drainage. But again, if members get to the point, and I know we're very early on in terms of where we are in consideration, but if members get to a point that they wish that to be included, we can look at details, wording beyond, but that should be a standard condition.
Okay. Right, great. Okay, so if I open the floor up to questions, I'll start with Councillor Udall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, I have a number of questions and I'll go through them all one by one because they're the concerns which I have about this application. So I'll do them en bloc and obviously hopefully an officer can answer them. The first concern I have is the impact of terracing effect that this application will create. I can recall when the initial plan application came to establish the current 3 houses on what was formerly the Grosvenor Arms Beer Garden, and it was decided at that stage that there needed to be a gap between those terraced houses and the pub to avoid a terracing impact being established, linking, basically making an appearance, but it's one long terrace, including the pub. I'd be interested to know how this application will obviously have a detrimental impact on that. If we can go back to the site plan on the screen, that would be useful for my next question. Now the site plan, the overall, that's it. You will notice the entrance to the car parking is via Grosvenor Walk. My great and significant concern is access is through a very narrow footpath which has got a cycling prohibition upon it. If it's considered inappropriate for cycling, it damn well should be inappropriate for cars. That does concern me greatly. Now, I know it's been established already that cars use that access point to get to the current position of car parking, but in reality, they don't, because it is so dangerous and so narrow. They're parking where the application is currently for the house off Henwick Road. They don't use the car parking area because it is so difficult to actually get to. And I would also point out, directly opposite the entrance to the car parking area is a sheltered housing unit containing a number of flats with elderly residents in there. So they will have an undue impact, potentially, of more parking going past the houses, which will create an impact and danger to them. So I would seek reassurances about that. If we're actually asking for parking to take place on a public footpath with a cycling prohibition, that doesn't sound right. I'm not comfortable with that. I have got also concern about the protection of the artwork which exists on the end of the pub, the Grosvenor Arms pub, which is well liked and appreciated locally. This establishment of this extra property would basically blank that out. You won't be able to see it. So I am seeking some assurances that what can be done to actually protect that artwork so it can still be viewed. The issue about parking on the highway is also a significant concern for me. These cars will be displaced, which are currently parked on that site. They will be displaced onto the highway, which is already greatly in demand and can't cope with any further car parking in that location. There's already significant demand for yellow lines to be added to that part of Henwick Road, and I think this decision will actually make that situation worse and encourage more requests for parking restrictions. I think that's where I am at the moment. There is... the protection of the open space, which is currently the area between the pub and the first established area, that clearly is not being used as designed, but there's no reason why it can't be used as such in the future. So I'm just seeking some assurances about that as well. There is a potential impact on the business of the Grosvenor Arms, and I'm wondering whether there can be any protection can be assured through conditions to protect that business. I'm particularly concerned about the natural conflict which exists between a public house and residential amenity. This is going to be incredibly close, and I do fear that there will be an impact and a conflict which will exist. I'm confident that residents and pubs can peacefully coexist, but it does need some conditioning in order to enable that to happen. I think I'll leave it there, but I'll seek assurances on those important issues first, Chair.
Through you, Chair, I'll attempt to answer, I think, 5 points that have been raised. And if I miss anything, I'm sure Laura will help me out. So, in respect of design and the terracing effect, I think in terms of the terracing effect, that normally occurs in terms of a design element, and is it within the SPD about extensions to property, and I appreciate that that could be construed as being applicable in this location. You'll see within the report that officers have looked at the design carefully and consider that yes, it could be narrower, yes, it could be looked at in a different format. But as Laura set out quite comprehensively within the report, we've identified that as an element of harm, but have balanced that, as members will have to do as well within the tilted balance and on the balance that we can provide a unit that is space compliant and actually slightly bigger than space compliant. So actually we're getting decent accommodation for residents. And just as a note, the other units which were approved some time ago before the space standards were introduced are below space standards. So we've got below space standard units, and actually what we're going to look at and what is being proposed is above one. In terms of Grosvenor Walk and the access arrangements, the Highway Authority have concluded that it's acceptable and that it can be accessed on that location. And you'll also notice that both the applicant has agreed, but also the Highway Authority have conditioned that both the access element, the footpath, the driveway and the parking area need to be improved in terms of their surfacing arrangements. What we feel as part of that is actually an added benefit in terms of existing residents and existing parking areas to actually make that more suitable for parking. I can't say whether that the existing residents are parking on that area of space. I haven't got that information, but as ward councillor, you will probably know that. And I don't know, and I'm not in the mind of those residents to say whether it's inaccessible or whether the state of that parking area is unsuitable and there's a choice that has been made. In terms of displacement onto the existing highway, it's not an allocated or an approved space for parking. So in terms of a decision-making position, are you displacing parking? Well, actually, you're not, because there is no lawful position that should be used for parking area. It's used informally at the moment, and actually, in terms of safeguarding parking on the road, there is the normal safeguards that are in place, and I appreciate that that is some tension for members when they have residents that contact them in terms of parking arrangements, but the civil enforcement officers are there to be able to enforce those areas of unacceptable parking. The artwork that's provided on the side gable, it's not a historic building. It's not something that we can protect through the planning process, and I appreciate that it may be something that is appreciated by residents, and I'm sure that the applicant, as listening to this, will take that away and have some consideration. There is going to be a gap, and as you saw within the site location, so there will still be glimpses of that artwork, and I'm sure the applicant will have a look at other areas that can include artwork should going forward. But from a planning perspective, there is no way that the planning policies can allow protection for that. 4 was parking on the highway, and I think I've dealt with that under the previous point. And then in terms of open space, this area beside the pub isn't open space, and yes, it could be used for open space, but that's not what's being proposed. It is a previously developed site. It is a brownfield in terms of development, and that provides a positive argument in favour of the development. There is no designation to protect that particular area as open space. I think I've covered off all of your points and queries.
I think I was trying to get in my opening comment, and probably not doing it very well, is could this be considered by any scope of the imagination and overdevelopment of the space which is available? That is the biggest concern locally, and I wonder whether the officers can comment on the allegation which the residents have made.
Through you, Chair, we don't consider that it's an overdevelopment of the site. There is adequate amenity space that has been provided. A parking space which has been accepted by the Highway Authority has been provided. A space standard unit has been provided. Actually, we feel that it is a suitable development, and if officers had any concerns over overdevelopment, members would not be considering it today.
Okay, I've got Councillor Kinsley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to refer to one of the photos. I don't know if it's possible to put those up, just showing the existing buildings. There's a ramped access showing, which would be cut off, I think, by the development. I wanted to ask if there'd been any consideration of that. Yeah, there. So if you sort of zoom in, no, the previous ones there. Can you see at the bottom, well, up top, and actually 3 of those, you can see there's a ramp going up to that green door, which will be, and that access will be made quite difficult once the cycle parking is in place. So I don't know if there's anything you can share with us about that. And there was something else I was going to ask about, following on from Councillor Oodle, and I can't remember what it is, but that will you be able to respond on that?
Through you, Chair, just to pick up on that point, the Highway Authority have looked at that carefully, and what is going to be proposed is that it is reinstated to the original, what it should have originally been for the original planning permission for those units. Thank you, Chair.
Just to add to that, so in terms of the ramped access to provide level access, what is on site at the moment isn't in accordance with the previous approval. So what would be provided is still level access to the properties, but in a different format that then complies with what was previously approved.
Thank you for that. One other thing, I remembered what it was. Talked about surfacing of the road at the back. That's great, but it will deteriorate. And then can we tie the developers in to say, right, they need to come back 10, 15, whatever years down the line to say, can they need, because it will fairly quickly get potholed and what have you.
Through you, Chair, and very shortly, no, we can't require a maintenance provision, but we are asking for details of the specification. So in terms of what will be provided, and it's lightly trafficked, it should last for a fair amount of time, but that will be an ongoing maintenance that will be considered by the applicant.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. A bit confused about the access, so maybe I've misunderstood something. Is the access from Grosvenor Walk, is that within the legal ownership of the applicant?
Through you, Chair, just to confirm, yes, so the red line that was shown on the plan, that is the applicant's area of ownership. That's
Yeah, I was just clarifying that. I saw the red outline, but I didn't know whether that was for planning purposes or not, because my concern was if that access road was in the ownership of somebody else, and then they denied access to the site, they could put a gate across the entrance, and they wouldn't be able to have access. But if we can, we're absolutely sure. Okay, thank you.
Do I have any other questions, Tom? Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Just one, I heard reference about cycling prohibited on Grosvenor Walk. I believe that starts to the east of the rear access and doesn't actually impede that there is vehicular access up Bromyard Terrace, which is narrow. So my understanding is that, is my understanding there correct? My main concern that's troubling me a bit is the cycling storage. Looking at the drawing 2503_DO3B, I'm not convinced that that is particularly secure or certainly not covered. Is that my understanding that it's barely secure, and it's not covered? And do we have requirements within our county or city? I think it's on our county streetscape, isn't it, design guide, that we need to have covered lockable enclosures for residential developments for cycle parking. Just want to check if that's a correct understanding.
Through you, Chair, two points. I believe that you are correct in terms of where the prohibition is, but again, I cannot speak definitively. I'm probably looking at the same picture that you are on Google Street View of where the sign is. I can't say definitively of where that legal TRO starts. In terms of the cycle areas, just refer you to page 24 with the condition that is now number 8, which talks about details to be submitted and approved in writing. Within the streetscape design guide, it does ask for them to be covered and secure, so we will have details of that, and officers will ensure that they do comply with the streetscape design guide.
Councillor Udall, you had another question.
Yeah, my biggest concern is one about pedestrian safety in Grosvenor Walk. And I do wonder whether there is a potential for seeking further potential conditions to enable the use of bollards to be located to prevent illegal access by vehicles further up the walk, where they are not currently permitted to go. To illustrate the safe route for vehicles through the use of physical barriers and bollards to gain access to the parking area. Because I am very, very concerned, because it's a very popular, very well-used footpath, linking most of St John's to the riverside.
Sorry, Councillor, can I clarify something? Are you the county councillor for this area as well?
Yes, but that's
so, because the Grosvenor Walk's outside the site, is there anything we can actually do for something that's outside the site?
Through you, Chair, and just in response to Councillor Udall's question, the site access needs some work, and as you'll see within the application site, there is currently an area of concrete that leads before that, which is still part of the highway. So the proposal is to create almost a splayed access point, so that vehicles will be completely up within the highway and then move within the access point, rather than going on to Grosvenor Walk. There is already a bollard, as you will be fully aware, that prevents access onto Grosvenor Walk itself. The access point onto Bromyard Terrace is already there, it's part of the highway. So in terms of requiring anything further, I think it's probably going beyond the reasonable expectations of a single dwelling and a single, an additional car that's using an already utilised access. But what there is an opportunity to do, as we mentioned earlier, is to make this access work better for Grosvenor Walk, provide some consolidation in terms of its surface treatment and its availability and accessibility. And I think that is an opportunity that is afforded as part of this application. But I would venture to suggest that probably going any further than that is probably going beyond the reasonableness of what this application presents.
Paul, does condition 6 pick up the details for the access to the site, and therefore submitted details to the local planning authority implemented in full? Yeah. That's what you were just talking about. Okay, fine. Okay. Do I have any other questions? No.
Thank you, Chair. I've been looking through this again and again and just trying to weigh it up in my mind. And I think when I initially looked at the plan, I looked at the whole row of terraces and thought, is that what we're about to discuss? And obviously no, because there's houses already there. This is the addition of one more to an existing row of 3. I think in terms of the net impact on the area, it is relatively slight. I can understand some of the concerns that have been raised by residents around the loss of what they might sort of perceive as a public amenity from the informal parking spaces. But again, I think on the balance of it, the existing hard standing around the Grosvenor's Arms looks like it's in fairly poor condition anyway. The area clearly will need some form of redevelopment in some capacity. If this proposal goes through and what is currently the rear access is improved in some way to make it more suitable as car parking access, I could see that working. I think that is probably the necessary condition from my point of view. But otherwise, I think it's a fairly solid proposal. It does slightly offend me that the house frontage will be asymmetrical from the rest of the row, but that concern isn't deep enough to be able to justify voting against it. So that was just sort of a whistle-stop tour of my thoughts as I've been listening to the debate thus far. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberley, Councillor Kimberley. That's really useful, and I had exactly the same thoughts. I thought exactly the same. It's like, why wouldn't you do it the same? But it's more important to meet the minimum space standards, isn't it? As another councillor on this committee says, we don't want people living in rabbit hutches. I think you've said that before, haven't you, Councillor Amos? Councillor Agar?
Thank you. You know, I have a bee in my bonnet about design and always have had, and I need to apologise to the committee if I was part of the 2018 decision to build these ghastly things. Because, I mean, would you call those white bits oriel windows? I'm not quite sure, really. All I can say is this thing matches the ones alongside it in a large degree, and I can't see a reason to reject it. I just wish I could. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I tell you what, though, Councillor Agar, when looking at that elevation, I'm quite pleased to see the brick wall finished, actually. You know,
If I may respond to that, I think, you know, this isn't going to win the Sterling Prize, is it, for God's sake? And I do really want to shoot the architect, and probably I should shoot myself in the process, really. But I mean, you know, flat roofs, for example, I think that was a flat roof as well, which isn't good for drainage, stuff like that. It just isn't very good design, and I would hope in the future for better design, I hope.
Members, and just through the chair, just one point that has come up, that the whole of the site is within one ownership, and that was, I think, the response that was provided. Just to clarify that the applicant isn't the owner of the site. So whilst the whole of the site is within the same owner, which was the advice that you were given, just to be clear that the applicant isn't the owner of the site. However, that does not prevent or provide you with any concerns. The correct notices have been provided on the applicant, and planning permission goes with the site, and all of the conditions would need to be complied with before occupation took place or that any construction took place. And beyond that, any transactions or any requirements between the applicant and the owner are a legal matter between themselves and not one for this committee.
Councillor Round?
Sorry, thank you. I'm now completely confused, sorry, Paul, about the ownership and the access. So if the applicant is different to the owner, is there any risk that the owner of the site could sell off the access way and then the development site could be sold off to somebody else? Or are we saying that we've got that reassurance that because the permission is there, I'm just a bit, maybe I'm getting myself in knots here. I'm just worried about if the access way is sold off, therefore there's no access to the rear of the property and the parking space, if the owner then decided to sell off or split off the site. Or am I just getting in a bit of a mess, really?
In short, the permission cannot be implemented if that's severed. So the way that the conditions are constructed, particularly condition 2 that says it has to be built in accordance with the approved plans, that there are conditions that have to be met before the development takes place or that is occupied. The conditions there provide the safeguard that it has to be part and parcel with the same. But just to reiterate the point that I'm making is that the totality of the site, including the application side, is all under one ownership. So the applicant hasn't got any ownership of any part of the site at this stage, but that's something that can happen as part of a planning permission. You can apply for planning permission on land that you don't own, and that's just the nuances of the planning system.
Councillor Udall?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I appreciate what I'm about to say will probably not gain a majority support in this council chamber, but I do have some significant concerns about the appearance of the design, the impact and the visual amenity it will have in the local area, the loss of potential space which could be used in future by the pub. I've got concerns about access to the car parking, which I believe I can't justifiably accept what the County Council have no objections, because I think it is dangerous. It's a junction of 3 roads combining in one area, which has got a very heavy pedestrian flow. I cannot see how this can be realistically safe, but obviously I'm not an expert, I just live in the area. I do believe it is an overdevelopment of the site. In many ways, I'm reassured that the owner of the site is not the applicant, because the owner of the site has clearly had problems completing the previous application. But I do believe that the application as it currently stands could be in conflict with the business arrangements of the neighbouring pub and would provide a restriction on pub operations. And I do have concerns about how that can be met within conditions. I don't think it can do. One parking space is not sufficient, in my opinion. It does not take into account visitor parking or multiple car ownership in the property. I know we all want to encourage other forms of transport, but we have to live in the reality that that does not always exist. So the impact of this property and this application will have a devastating impact on roadside parking in the area. And I do have serious concerns about the impact that will have on other road users and on road safety. For all those reasons, I can't support this application.
Councillor Udall, because you are the local councillor, can you tell me why you think or how this house will impact the operations of the pub in a detrimental way? You said that.
Yeah, I think the pub's operations have been already limited and restricted by the development which has already happened. This used to be the beer garden for the pub, and that was the main attraction to this pub. I believe that the pub in itself has recently made a number of plan applications which have not been granted or have been changed as a consequence of residential objections. I think its ability to actually trade and to grow and to have a functioning social environment in the pub which would attract customers to make it viable is now endangered by this development. Consequently, I believe this is a deliberate plan in order to make the pub unviable, in order to convert this into housing as well.
Sorry, when you talk about it could have been a pub garden, I'm just, in the officer's notes, it says historic mapping shows the site's been vacant since 1886.
No, all the housing which is on that site was the historic pub garden for the Grosvenor Arms, and was done for such. It was the only walled pub garden in that part of Worcester. Jenny, Councillor Barnes will confirm whether I'm right
which
or not.
bit of this site was 1886 then?
The Grosvenor Arms was actually named after Mrs Grosvenor, who lived in Bromyards Terrace and was the local landlord of the area, and was also a local small holding. So the area has been used as a pub since 1886, I believe, named after Mrs Grosvenor, and the consequences are that it was a pub. It was a pub garden.
That was when the pub was built.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps. Okay, right.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at condition 10, which is the renewable and or low carbon measures proposed, have we had any indication from the applicant as to what they want to put in? And could you help us just understand what sort of things these might be? What sort of measures we would anticipate? You know, is it typically solar panels, or is there something else that I'm not considering?
Through you, Chair, it can be a number of things. Typically solar panels, could be air source heat pumps or similar. There are a number of things in terms of renewable energies, but mainly solar, I would have thought, would be the main aspect.
Councillor Amos.
Yes, thanks. Not much I can add. Colleagues have made most of the points. Technically, the parking situation is okay, even according to the Highways own criteria. but I share Councillor Udall's concern. The reality is they're not going to be using that. You can provide a parking space. You can't force somebody to park there. So they will be parking on road, and it is a very, very busy area. And of course, as Councillor Udall also said, what about visitors and what about deliveries? And it seems to me that the access there is really redundant, because I just don't think it's going to be used. It is tight. So I have concerns about that, although technically, as I say, it meets the highways criteria. The second aspect that bothers me, I'm not quite sure why anybody would want to live here, to be honest with you. Never mind the design, which I have to say is hideous. I mean, it looks like a orange box with a white box stuck on the front of it. Anyway, that's just my personal view. But why would anybody want to live so close to a pub? That's my question. And so what I'm asking, Chair, is can we, I think I know the answer, but can we condition that people who choose to live within yards of a pub don't start making complaints about noise and disturbance? Because that would be wholly unfair. The pub is well established. And my concern is that what will happen over the course of it, certainly if there's a change of ownership as well of the property, people start saying, you know, and that will affect the behaviour of the pub. But I think, you know, caveat emptor, anybody who moves in here really needs to be aware that they're moving next to a pub. So don't complain about noise afterwards, which I suspect it's only a couple of years we're going to start getting complaints. And that would be unfair. So can we condition that people don't start moaning about noise having chosen to live next to a pub or not?
Through you, Chair, I think you know the answer to that question. That would be no. However, as part of any complaint process, as I understand it, and in my limited ability of understanding it, Worcester Regulatory Services, who will consider any noise complaints, members may be aware of the agent of change principle, which is established in planning spheres. So the agent of change is the person who has come there last, therefore has to consider what is there before. And I think that's where, Councillor Amos, you're sort of going to. And that is certainly something that is taken into consideration by Worcester Regulatory Services, that if you've arrived and you live next to a hot food takeaway, as an example, or that you live next to a nightclub, that is not purely curtailed because you've moved in. However, should those arrangements at the public house or the nightclub or the hot food takeaway increase from a level that was there previously, it doesn't mean that they can just have carte blanche to do whatever they like. That would then could be action, but it is something that is considered about where you are, what is there before, as part of those considerations, as I understand it.
Councillor Kinsley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Although it's good to see this sort of small-scale, development that meets a certain housing need, I am quite concerned about the parking situation. I mean, this committee just only, I don't know, a few months ago, we gave permission to a block of flats, didn't we, just further down this road, and we had a very big debate about the effect of the parking, effect on the parking of that development. And here we are, just yards up from that development, talking about further increasing those pressures. I'm interested to know, because it says in the report that the existing three have allocated spaces, one-car spaces. And so I should have asked this earlier on when we were asking questions of the officer, but I can't see where those are. Is it the on-road? So that it isn't that. Ah, I see. Right. Okay. And is that space at capacity then? Is that what you? Sorry. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's my concern. Is.
Through you, Chair, as indicated within the officer report, they are allocated, and as Councillor Udall has pointed out, they are to the rear of the property. So the development builds upon that. It builds on the design, whether you like it or not. Let's call it a Marmite situation. But it replicates both the design, both in terms of its physical elevational design, but also the layout in terms of garden areas and also the parking provision. And it replicates what has already been there. And from an officer's point of view, it puts us in a position where it has something that has been accepted. It is an additional unit which would be welcomed in terms of additional housing numbers, and it replicates what has gone before.
If I may, Chair, the car parking at the rear does exist. It's hardly ever used simply because it is inconvenient for the residents to use it because it is too far away from the properties concerned. Consequently, they park on the highway or on a space which is currently under discussion for this application. I still believe, it's my argument, that will remain unchanged. They will not require be designed to use the car park at the rear because it is too far away from the houses, it is too inconvenient for regular use, and therefore deliverers, visitor parking and residential parking will continue to be on Henwick Road where there's limited supply.
But we are talking about one house with one parking space. So Highway said that ideally they'd have two, but because it's in a sustainable location, they're accepting one. That's the position we're in. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Rightly or wrongly, when looking at applications, I also check out Google Maps and Street View, and it just helps to get a good sign of things. Page 20, paragraph 7.50, contains the line, "The agent has provided some further clarity in this regard and has advised there is no allocated parking for the public house on the application site." And there's talk about the frontage where there's a number plate attached to the wall. But at the back, where the proposed parking for the property is, there's a sign attached that one can see in Google Street View image from July 25 saying pub staff parking only, number 21. And that's evident if you use Google Street View and travel up where the parking is for the neighbouring houses, 21 ABC. So just wondering how to reconcile this, a statement from the agent that there is no allocated parking for the public house on the application site, and yet there's a sign very clearly showing as pub staff and parking only, number 21. And it creates doubt in my mind.
Through you, Chair, the applicant's position in terms of the parking within the application site has probably muddied the water slightly in terms of what he means by the application site. He means exactly where the dwelling is to be going, and I appreciate that there might be cars parked there at the moment, and that was why officers sought that clarification. And as has been indicated both verbally and within the presentation, that the applicant, the owners are very clear that that is not something that is to be it's in an informal location. In terms of the wider parking area for residents and the parking at the back, in some ways that's beyond the scope of this consideration. We're considering whether one additional parking space can be provided in this space located, and actually what is being proposed is the consolidation, the marking out, the provision of those parking spaces so that it's very clear that they are allocated for residents and not for anything else. So if that helps clarify and consolidate that area, I think from an officer's point of view, we see that as a benefit going towards the application.
Councillor Amos.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to be quiet, but you provoked me. Because, yes, you did. But most unlike you, Chair. Most unlike you. But you used the word sustainable. And I knew it would come in. I knew it would come into. Sorry? Right, well, okay, let's blame highways then. But the point is, Mr. Round usually uses it, and he knows, and he gets his questions and the answers ready. But I can't. But is part of the argument then in favour of the development that it's sustainable? Which, of course, bung in. You know, when you get desperate, you say, well, it's sustainable, and then it's got to be passed. But what do you mean by sustainable, Chair? Because I wait till she's listening to me. That's all right. Yeah, number 30. Yeah, number 30. But Chair, but seriously, are we saying in terms of this development in particular that it's sustainable because a bus goes past? Because if so, can you define? Can you tell me what is being sustained with this property? Tell me what is being sustained, because you can have properties in the middle of nowhere and they've been standing for hundreds of years. They're not near a bus stop. So what makes this sustainable, but a development in the middle of nowhere with no public transport? Why is that not sustainable? I just don't get this word. I really don't. Because that reflects, you see, on highways policy. Because if we're saying, well, it's sustainable, so you don't need a car, that's not true. If you've got 2 bedrooms, you're going to have 2 cars. We all know that, because everybody doesn't cycle everywhere. So what does it mean? Either you, Chair, or Mr. Round can answer.
I'm quite happy to develop,
Go on, Mr. Round.
through you, Chair. The Highway Authority have mentioned that in terms of sustainable transport and the opportunities that are afforded to people who would potentially live in this location to alternative means of transport. So cycling, wheeling, bus operations, walking, and I'm sure members will be aware, because they know this location very well, is that directly opposite this site is the walkway through to the city centre, and there's a lovely sign that's been put up there that it's half a mile to the city centre, 10-minute walk. So it provides opportunities for people not always to use vehicles, but to use alternative means of transport, both wheeling and walking.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I could just leave it with one simple question. Other than me, who else is going to use the bus to get home tonight? There we are. Okay, thank you.
I'm walking, Councillor Amos.
You're walking? That's...
Within 10 minutes of the meeting where we are now. Councillor Kinsley.
Thank you, Chair. Just telling you about get the bus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as the 31 runs past, and all the ones going towards Stourport and Martley and all that tend to go up that route. I remember the pub garden with bouncy castle and lots of wasps. That was me. You were the wasp, were you? No, oh, okay.
Big wasp.
And it's not just the 3 houses on this front that was built on the pub garden. Also, 2A, 2B, Grosvenor Walk were also built, and they show in the diagram. So I suspect that 2 of those 6 parking spaces that are shown relate to 2A and 2B Grosvenor Walk, which leaves 1 space, so they'd already probably anticipated this being built at some point. Now, it's slightly bigger, so it fits the new criteria for size. So it's a large ugly building rather than smaller ugly building, where the other 3 are deficient. But it's still an ugly building. I think possibly we're going to have to accept it, but it isn't the good way to do planning, is it? That we have some horrible buildings being proposed, and they're not quite bad enough. Now, can we trust the person who's built the 3 and then didn't complete the work on the land that is now being applied for? Will we actually trust, or can we go back and make sure that he actually does fulfil all his obligations this time, where he clearly didn't last time? So it worries me that this space should have been put into decent order and hasn't been over several years. Obviously, our enforcement team didn't get to it, or nobody complained, but it shouldn't have been in that where it is now. It should have been a fully functional space which actually works against the pub. So I don't think we can do much about this. I think we'll probably have to accept it, but it's one family home more in the city, but it's another blot on the landscape. I think it's really sad that we've got such poor quality design going up anywhere in our city anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Kimberley, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think as debates go, I worry that we risk transitioning from sublime to ridiculous. I think in terms of perspective, it is one house on a site that has already been built on. I think that it is too late to shut the stable door if we didn't want this historic pub garden to be built on. It has already been built on. It is a case of completing the job in a sense that has already been started. Would we as a committee have approved this particular design if it was coming to us fresh on an unbuilt location? Very conceivably not. I won't speculate. I don't want to cause annoyance, but I think it's reasonable to imagine that the current planning team might have sent that back for further notes and revision. However, what we have got is what we have got, and we are adding to what we already have. I note that the existing site is being used as informal parking, but in the report under, I think 7.51, I think I made the note, but I was going at speed. It notes that the landowner does not seem to welcome the space being used as informal parking and has actually tried to take steps to prevent that. If I've misunderstood that part of the report, then I apologise, but that's what I've understood from it. And I think that it is possibly an example of the well-established phenomenon that supply can drive demand when it comes to road infrastructure. Yes, losing this space will annoy some and displace some, but it will also potentially prevent annoyance for others. If the applicant is prepared to take on resurfacing the access route at the back of the property, I think that is really important because its current state isn't acceptable. If it isn't a condition already, please could we make it one? And please could I move to propose this so that we can move forwards. Thank you.
Councillor Agar.
Thank you. If you hadn't proposed it, I would have done, so I'm happy to second it with profound apologies over the design, but I think there's not much we can do about that at this stage. So, seconding, thank you.
Through you, Chair, if members are happy for it to be the standard condition that they tend to see, there's no need to trouble Chair and Vice Chair. It was only if you were concerned about that, but it will be the standard condition.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. I've got a proposer and a seconder. Is everyone happy to go to a vote? Has everyone said their piece? There's no one who wants to say anything? Who hasn't spoken yet? No? Okay, so are we happy to move to a vote? In that case, okay, all right. Can I see all votes in favour, please? I think that could be reluctant from a few of us, Councillor Amos. Yeah. Abstentions? 1, and against? 1. Thank you. That has carried. I don't believe we have any other business. No. So that's the meeting closed. I'll see you next month. Thank you.